Hello everyone and welcome to Blue Tengu's game development show. Uh, it's early. It's 5 a.m. Do you know where your kids are? Hopefully they're asleep. Well, at least the new time slot does work out better, I think, for everyone else in the world. As I've as I've noticed in the past, like from working here in Japan, usually having to coordinate meetings with Europe and America, Japan usually gets the bad end of the stick on that one because it's usually us that has to come in like super early or stay super late to have a meeting. But well, it works out. Hopefully, my mind is actually going to work this early. We'll see. We'll see. The problem isn't waking up early. The problem is actually getting to sleep early. I'm not an old man, so it's a little tough to go to sleep right when the sun goes down. But let's jump into it and see what happens. By the way, 123 gas 321. Thank you for showing up yesterday. I wish I would have come by earlier to tell you uh, it was today. Did jump in and check, but and Panda Bits, I hope you feel better soon because the flu. I had that 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. That was not pleasant at all. But let's jump to the desktop here and the task list. In overtime, since I do have the kid behind the magical green screen in the other room, uh, my family's back. So if you hear crying and whatnot, that's my kid. it's it's not someone being tortured. But what that meant was last week was my last week to actually get stuff that required a lot of concentration done. So I went through and did a lot of overtime, a good 20-hour chunk, maybe a little more. I might be underestimating how much I put into this, but um, adjusted the room size to make sure that the grid was even on all sides. That grid is the one that determines when islands pop up. I wanted to make it even so that like if you went west, you didn't have like a different sized like buffer ocean than if you went east or something like that. Also fixed the menu to reflect the resolution, like when you changed resolutions in the options. Before like the menu would be all screwed up. Finally fixed that problem. UI menus, stuff like that in GameMaker. UI is definitely not GameMaker's strong suit. Uh, it is probably where it's weak compared to other engines. It takes a lot of work to get things kind of working right. In this case, well, from last year's game, Project Spaghetti, I knew it would take time, which is why I put 6 hours there. But yeah, it's working now. The opening stage also filled out the opening stage so that it's now actually got tiles in the right places and stuff. It's still very rough, obviously, the motion and everything else. There's no animation involved. Ending also did the same thing with the ending that I did with the opening and have a timeline-based sequence. I even have the start of like credits going, like as the player's kind of flying off into the sunset. Uh, Producer B Grim, Programmer Bob, things like that show up. Also added the network menu so that you can configure your Twitch support. In Project Spaghetti, I did this using like get string or something, get input string, which you're not supposed to use in GameMaker. Well, they don't recommend it. The reason they don't recommend it is that it stops everything until the user inputs something, as opposed to get string asynchronous, which means it waits in the background for input. The reason I use the regular get string in old GameMaker with Project Spaghetti was because that's actually what I wanted to do, is stop everything until the user actually either said okay or cancel. This time around I still want to do that, but I went ahead and kind of followed GameMaker's advice and went through it. It is a little more work because if you do get async, that means the player can ignore that message box that pops up and start jumping around menus and stuff, and that would cause all sorts of chaos. So what you have to do is lock everything down while waiting for that message. So essentially you get the same thing in the end anyway, which is just nothing works until they input stuff. Let's see, I'll get through this and then kind of catch up to the chat. Pause menu also got that working. So you can change resolutions, sound, brightness, contrast, that sort of stuff in the pause menu. I'm not going to do the thing that I do with Project Spaghetti, which is like have you able to go into multiple nested menus. Figure it's probably not worth the work, because I think if you wanted to do like big control changes, things like that, you would do it from the main menu anyway. So it's just basic stuff like you jump in the game and it's like, whoa, this is too dark or something. It allows you to adjust that stuff, sound effect, volume, stuff like that. but nothing too complicated. If you want to do that, main menu's fine. Also did the voice recording. I still do have a few lines left over for like when you fill out the collection, but I did the voice recording. That's, let's see, how many hours was that? Well, there were about 100 some odd lines. Surprisingly, my voice made it to the end. Thankfully, I did use Audacity to put effects on it and stuff, so it's fine. But that's all in the game. So all those, not, I decided in the end not to put it on every artifact because it obviously having voice in the background, if the player wants to be watching subtitles and stuff like that, it's going to kind of stop the game flow. So there's no point doing it for just every artifact that you can find because there's hundreds of them. So what I did was I just put special voice in that kind of goes into story bits for rare artifacts. And I mentioned this on Twitter, but Skyring has like about four story layers. So if you just play through it without really collecting anything and just grab the monoliths and go, you get story from the monoliths. So you do get voice over from the monoliths with some story. That's one layer. The second layer is if you grab a bunch of artifacts, especially the rare ones, you'll get more story kind of background into the world, the kind of state it was in. And the third layer is if you really go nuts and manage to find all the artifacts. Then there's that story. I don't mean you have to find all of the artifacts to get all of it, but the bits and pieces come when you find chunks of artifacts. And we're going to be working on that today, the artifacts menu. Let's see what else. Updated the enemy effects, like when the enemy's circled, there's like lightning that comes out and stuff, so it looks very metal now. Also, the mouse, when you do change the resolution, I changed the position of the mouse to be where it was when you change the resolution so that there's not this sudden jump, which is better than what I did in Project Spaghetti. That's an upgrade. My skills have been upgraded. Also, enemy cores, depending on how many monoliths you found, the enemies get more and more difficult. So I've also made it so that you have to circle more enemies to kind of pull out this strong special gem that restores all of your energy. Also, these are just kind of more effect stuff. That's not too important. Also threw in an extras menu, which will have the stuff we're working on today, the artifacts menu, and also the credits menu, which is where all your guys' names will be going, as well as a special thanks. And particles, I set the depth on them because particles by default there's no depth, so they just get drawn like the zero layer, which is on top of everything, which looks weird, like if you're fading out and all the particles are still there. But now that's all fixed. So that was quite a bit. Thankfully, I think I got all the tough stuff done, especially like this menu stuff. Let's get into the artifacts menu. So I do have kind of an empty artifacts menu here. And if you start the game, it's the first time starting it up, so it might take a while to convert all of that voice data. Sometimes it does that. Looks like it might be okay. We'll see. Yeah, I'm not sure what causes it, but I think something happens to the temp folder sometimes, so GameMaker wants to reconvert everything. Might just be the first time. Yeah. So the first time starting it up, it creates a temp folder and converts all of the data. So we're going to be here for a while because there's a lot of voice data. But let me go over what I kind of want to do with the artifacts menu. UI is something I'm not good at. And that's fair enough because there are professional UI designers out there. For me to say I'm any good at it would be kind of shitsure to them, rude to them. But rather than just, right now these menus are all very temporary. It's basically, the standard. You've got your title, you've got your options. You can go back and forth. It's a very standard, but Skyring is all about like circling and stuff. So I do want to have kind of a circle motif in here, not just go with the standard, top-down menu like this. But there's extras, artifacts. Yeah, so the menu's gonna go in here. So in the future, I do want to actually design a proper UI rather than just this kind of the same menu that we had in the retro game Project Spaghetti. Still thinking about it though. Design is not my forte, so trying to come up with, well, the thing that's hard about UI is coming up with, one, a cool design, two, something that's unique to the game, and three, something that people are going to get right away, because UI is one of those things where if you screw it up and people don't know how to use it, it gets frustrating fast because it's not part of the game, so it's usually less forgivable if you have a bad UI than other things like even things like how far you nest menu items and stuff like that. It's always this weird balancing act between having a lot of junk on the screen at once, but having it where you can get to it with one click or one step, versus, making things very clear and concise, but then you have like 10 menus that you have to go into. Like Mass Effect has kind of evolved over the years. That's a great example of how their like UI has kind of evolved over the years, because I think in the beginning they had a really nested menu or something where it took a little work to get at the stuff you wanted, and then they started streamlining that later. UI is tough, but let's see. Think of good examples of UI. Like my favorite example is probably uh, Dead Space. This has absolutely nothing to do with Skyring, but UI, yes. There it is. Yeah, this is probably like back in the day when they first did this. This was like a big whoa moment. You don't normally notice like UI in games being cool, but this was one moment where it was. Because like your inventory, everything was actually overlaid inside of the game, projected and stuff. Everyone does it now, but back then nobody was really doing it. Other examples would be which Splinter Cell? Conviction? Which one's the older one? I'm trying to think of the older one. Let's see if they actually have a title. They might not have an episode title in here. Oh, there we go. Well, that's kind of working. There's another good example of UI. Splinter Cell Conviction did it great. What they did was, instead of having the usual just 2D pop-up thing or just pop-up thing in the same place, they actually built kind of the tutorials and objectives into the level and projected them. That was awesome. So these are like two examples of UI where it's like they did it so well that people actually notice. UI is one of those things where usually if you do it well, people don't notice. If you do it poorly, people notice and complain. For the actual UI design, I do want to have kind of a grid-ish structure, but because it is circular, I think in the end what I want to do is just have like these, I can't really do it in Paintbrush, but have sections, because the artifacts right now, there's the generic artifacts that you can get anywhere. There's the artifacts that you can get like in the snow zone. There's the artifacts that you can get only during the night. There's rare artifacts. There's things like that. So I kind of want to have a circular design. And then when you go around and click on them, you get the voice again that you heard one time in the game. So if you do want to go back into the menu after you've collected everything, you can kind of get the story by kind of clicking in order. The hard thing first is going to be getting all of these artifact lists to show up as selectable objects. So let's not worry about the circle motif for now, like the rest of the UI menus. Let's just kind of ignore that until I can get the design out on paper. No use going overboard with that stuff. Let's just get a grid going. So now it's just whether or not to do it by hand or not. There's a lot of them. There is a lot of them. Let's experiment. Let's experiment with doing it by hand. One problem with being up really early is that my voice is even easier to trash than normal. So yeah, let's create a menu item where if you click on it, you get the voice. Let's take it step by step. Let's do it the easy way first. So menu item. Let's find a different one. Resolution, contrast. Sure, let's use this one as a base. Archive item. If I don't have an archive one, I should be okay. Well, let's archive item. Archive item. Okay, so adding a constant to identify this menu. Menu ID archive item. And find a number I'm not using elsewhere. Probably the last thing I did put in is the archives menu, or artifacts menu, so that's 250. Credits, 2 extras, 260, so 270. As long as the number's different, it doesn't matter what it is. Menu text. They do normally have text. Would I want to be doing it that way, though? I don't think text is going to fit, so this is going to have to be kind of a derived version of this. New item. Yeah, so I'm going to have to override the draw to make sure that I don't draw out the text. There's not going to be any text involved. Mouse click, right released. Okay, those are ready to go. And I need to override draw. Mouse enter, mouse leave is okay. So going way back to text. Okay. And it's not drawing text, it's drawing the grid item. Oh yeah, how excited are you for this loop array index from hell? Yeah, I'm not excited. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I just have to take it in baby steps because it seems pretty daunting. I don't want any text, so we're not going to have text. We're just going to have this thing. So actually in this case, yeah, I'm going to keep this item and then probably pick, because right now the draw self, like for these menu items, it's just for drawing these sprites and stuff. But I think I would select the sprite that represents the item. And if I need to, I'll have a different collision mask on it. Draw set font. There is no font or aligning. This is the resolution stuff, so that should be okay. Let's actually whip up a quick menu item sprite. Duplicate sprite menu archive item. Edit this thing down. Because about 200 of these are going to have to fit on the screen, so it's not going to be that big. Resize canvas. I guess I can just resize canvas. By 32. I guess we could do the calculation real quick. The base room right now is 1280 by 720. So 1280. Obviously, you wouldn't fill the entire screen with these things, but just to get an idea. 40 by 20, 800. Considering some of it's going to be lost to the sides and the tops and whatnot. Yeah, can I double the size? Maybe let's try 48. Just recalculate real quick. 1280 divided by 48. So the most I could squeeze into the screen is 26 times 15. 390. Yeah, I should be able to get away with 48 by 48 because again, it's not going to fill the entire screen. There's going to be borders and stuff, so you don't get like the full screen, but this might be okay. And just so it doesn't look like a red square, let's add something here real quick. Okay. Fancy. And center. Okay. And we just want to switch that to that. Archive item. Okay, so if this gets drawn, it's just going to be a little square. Like that. And there are 48 of these going to fit on the screen at once. Well, I'm not going to put all 200 of these in now because, you know, if I decide later I have to switch it down to 32, or if I want to change something, then I'd have to change it 200 places. So just until things get working, let's just try with a couple. So let's just start a couple here. Whoops. Yeah, it's just a game-by-game decision, I think. So there we go. We've got a couple of those. Should probably just keep this up. Next, I need to have something in here that stores the actual index of what it's going to be displaying. So let's see, UI menu index, and then we'll just set it to -1 by default. And artifacts list generate, I think. There we go. There's all my grids with the artifacts and whether you found them or not. So we've got artifact index, I. So let's see, this is the actual index. And I think I'm using something else to get the index to the title. So as long as I know the index, I can get to here. So I do need to just store the index. And the index starts from 0 for each of these grids. Okay. So I'm also going to need to know which grid I'm using. Yeah, okay, let's do this. Thought I might have already had constants for this artifact. Yes, I do. Okay. Forest, desert, generic one. Okay, I do already have constants for this, so I could use these constants. So I need a menu archive type, I guess? Let's go with that. And for example, this would be set to artifact generic, so it knows to look in the generic list. So like for example, if this is set to ID 3 or something, it'll look at the third ID within the artifact generic list. And these are things I want to set in the create code. So artifact menu archive index and type. So let's set those in here. Index equals 0. And again, you could do a script. Like if it is a simple grid, you could create a script that just kind of creates these objects as you need them. And that way you can adjust it by the script as opposed to visually. But in the future, I'm probably not going to have a perfect grid, so I figure I'll just start right away with the visual version. I also don't like using scripting for UI because it's hard to debug too. Artifact So this way, this item is 0 in the artifact generic list. I can probably just copy this stuff over. 1, 2, 3. And let's make these, let's see, let's make these rare. Just for a test, because rare is going to be a little bit different. Because rare actually has to play some voice. And 3. Okay, so now we have these two things to work with. They're set. Now it's just a matter of if you click on it, it gives you the right stuff. And retrieve title. Let's see. Let's just use this so that when you click on it, you get a title in the debug message. Before I go and break, I just want to make sure that's working, that I can get that done. So left mouse click. So if you click in here, switch, what is it? Menu, artifact type, case, artifact generic. So these are the lists. Let's break real quick. In fact, maybe I don't need to do this, at least for this step. Table. All right, let's see where I'm using this elsewhere. I may not need to do this. SCR artifact. Because it might already be built into this function. It just depends on how I'm using table. I should comment things better. My punishment for not commenting properly. Okay, yes, title. Okay, so I'm already using these constants here, so I don't need to actually use a switch statement if all I'm doing is getting the title and the text. Got it. And since I failed to comment things last time, I mean, if you look at the code, it makes sense, but yeah, let's just make it that much clearer so I don't have to look at anything. Indexing. Okay. So I don't need the switch statement. SCR, retrieve, artifact, list, retrieve, title, and menu, archive, type, menu, archive, index. Artifact, list, retrieve, and I can get the description easy enough too. Menu, archive, type, menu, archive, index. So for now, let's just show a debug message to make sure this is working. It should. I can't imagine there'd be anything that would go wrong with something like this. But there are more things in heaven and earth than in my imagination, so let's just try it. I think all of them have proper tables and indexes. So if I click it, there should be something popping up down here, text. There we go. Now it is working, so I can go on break. The one at the bottom, I need to fix the mask, I guess, but oh no, that's fine. Okay, so these are all working. The problem with the rare ones is that the title and the description are the same thing. I do have things working. It is working out. I can click on the things and I can get what I need out of them. Now it's just kind of building in more functionality into it. So I am going to take my break, which means showing you animated short, and I'll be back in about 6 minutes. I think it's a pretty short one this week. Grid of graphic objects, we kind of have that going. we do have that working. Zoned by conditions for finding them. Yeah, that's kind of working too, but I do want to add a little bit extra in here. Just so I remember to do it in the future. Let's just create a quick sprite. Sprite menu archive zone. Just so I remember that I have to do this, because otherwise I will forget. It's going to come down to the design in the end, so I don't want to overdo things. Let's see, 640, 320 by 200. And I'll explain what I'm doing as soon as I get it done. Black background here. I wanted it filled. Make sure it's filled. Alright, good enough. Just something rough and centered. And archive zone. The only thing I want this for is just to remind me that I do need to group these items. Shoot, that's right. I can't add sprites directly to a room. I do need an object. Alright. Obj, UI, menu, zone. It's literally just going to be this sprite, though. Okay, now I can edit. UI, menu zone, like that. Yeah, basically just to remember that these things are kind of grouped into different sizes and stuff like that. That they have different meanings. That's fine. Select an item for playback and subtitle. So this is what we need to do now. So menu zone and archive item. So right now we just have the stuff showing up down here in this debug display, but that's not good enough. We do need it to show up elsewhere. And this is going to be something where it's like, do I want a single text box at the bottom that just rotates through the items? UI is kind of a tough thing to describe through Paintbrush, but we'll give it a shot. So we have these groups up here. We have the things you can select in here. So if your mouse is hovering over this, for example, there's your mouse pointer hovering over this, is there going to be like just text that appears at the bottom? So you can see what you're hovering over, and then if you click on it, a description thing kind of blacks out the background, and appears here with the text until you click it away and you're back in the menu. Is it going to be something like that? Let's assume it's something like that. Okay, so I need another object. Object UI menu item archive name. So just like when your mouse is hovering over one of those boxes, you don't, because the boxes themselves aren't going to have text in them. So just that you can have the archive item text, like a baby food jar, or a can of pickled something or other, or whatever, just showing up at the bottom, so that you can just hover over things, find what you want, and click on it. That's just what that is for. So I do need something for that. Menu item, menu ID, archive name, menu ID, archive name 280, archive name. And this is actually going to be derived from the text box. So its parent is going to be just the basic menu UI text, like the thing I'm using on the titles and stuff, because it's just going to be text. It's just that the text itself is updated. So let's move this back to this. And the mask, make that this again. Okay. Probably should have derived this from a different one. Draw, I don't need to do anything with draw. I can just let the parent handle it. So I'll get rid of that. You can't click on it, so I'm not going to do anything with this. Yep. So I can just get rid of these. Okay. So it's taking basically the same principle as those titles. You don't click on it, you can't do anything with it. It just shows text in a menu. And that means it gets all of this stuff. So menu text is the thing I have to update based on where the mouse is hovering. So inside of menu item archive name, I have to change menu text to whatever it is I'm hovering over. And that's going to be in here. So mouse enter, the behavior here has to be overridden. So mouse enter, which means the mouse pointer actually enters the object. Let me just grab out what I had. Oops, not that. This? Yeah, okay, just so I remember what it was called. That's the same. Well, I guess I could just use inherited. So the fact that it's selected is the same. But it's got to update something. So if there is a spot for changing the name, then change it. So there's our if. And we're going to set that menu text to be whatever this item's text is. So what we were doing in show debug message, we're going to be doing in here instead. Yeah, so this stuff. The title's going to go in there. And this is an example of what you have to do through scripting because you can't do it through GameMaker's UI thing. When you do have like objects talking back and forth, it's kind of tough to do that stuff in GameMaker's UI thing here because the UI thing only gives you 3 options. You can either make this action happen to the stuff in this object. If it's a collision event, you can make it happen to the other object, or you can just define an object. But if you want to access something inside of this object and convey that to the other object, you can't do that through this stuff. You have to do that through scripting. So that's kind of where you do kind of have to script. So menu text. We want menu text to be this. What was showing up in the debug message thing down below is what we want the menu text to be equal to now. So update the menu text. And I'll keep these debug messages around just so I have them. So mouse enter, it should update that, and I don't want this anymore. So update the menu text when the mouse goes into that thing. Let's see if this works. Menu text. Oh, I do need to do one more thing. Mouse enter. Not this menu text, but this menu text. Just the whole reason I was doing this in the first place. Oh, come on. Let me copy it. Let me copy it. Okay. Well, I could just use with. In fact, the one nice thing about if you do use with, which is GameMaker's way of just saying transfer control to something else, the nice thing is you don't actually have to test if that instance exists. So we'll get rid of that. Save a step. So if that works, if my mouse is hovering over one of those things, the menu text should change. I think I do need to drop that menu text in somewhere, though. I didn't do that. So I do need to do that real quick. Sorry for the false start. But basically what I mean is, if you're hovering over this, there'll be text kind of down here that shows what that stuff is. But I actually have to add that object in here. Okay, objects, UI, archive name, and for example here. Okay, just at the bottom. Now there should actually be text that's down there displaying. What's it going to display when you leave the item? Yeah, so it'll probably stay stuck on whatever I hovered over last. Not set. Archive index. Mouse enter. Menu archive index not set. Is my width too big? I can't use width. Okay. Got it. Got it. Yeah, I can't use width because I'm pulling things out from the parent. Okay. Well, so much for that. Thought I could get away with it, but no. So the width doesn't work in that case. I have to actually use this, which if you are going to use this version of accessing another object's information, you have to check if it exists. So basically what I was doing outside with the instance count. Because these two last things, these menu archive type, menu archive index, belong to the actual archive item that I'm hovering over, whereas the menu text belongs to that text box at the bottom. So no width for me. Okay, and hover. Yes, there we go. The font style and everything else is the exact same as the menu right now, so it's a little jarring. It does look like something you could select, but there we go. As you hover over these things, you can see what they are. And now the next thing would be if you clicked on it to have something happen. Yeah, we do have to handle one thing like I was mentioning. Once you leave this box, that text should go away. So I do need to handle that as well. Archive item, mouse leave. So I need to override mouse leave as well. Hello. Hey, Risa said hello. It's been a while since someone used the old blue Tengu bot. Yes, but Risa. Hello back. Hello from Japan at 6:30 in the morning. But let's override the mouse leave thing. And mouse leave inside of item is here. So I need to remember that. Let's inherit. And on leave.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Whoever said that, you're welcome. And we'll just get rid of the text if they leave. The one thing we have to be careful about with this is if I do squeeze two grid items together so that there is no point where the mouse is hovering over nothing, if even for a frame, then those two things could kind of come into conflict. Like one thing could erase the text after the other one updated it, so even though you're hovering over something, there could be no text. Right now we have gaps, so it's okay. And knowing that limitation, it might be worth keeping those gaps. Okay, yep. Now when I leave, the text disappears. Let's see what happens when I switch quickly from one to the other. Okay, so I can theoretically move fast enough to get things to break. So just using mouse leave is probably not a great idea. The better solution is probably to do this within archive name itself. Because the problem is if within one frame I move the mouse from one box to another, this happens. Mouse leave overrides mouse enter, and no text shows up. So let's make this a little more robust. Archive name is the one that's going to have to do this stuff. How to go about this? Archive item, mouse enter, mouse leave. How to go about this? Because mouse enter and mouse leave. Trying to think about the execute order. I would imagine that, at least based on this, enter usually gets executed before leave if they're in the same frame. The only thing I can think to do is use a global variable. Don't really want to do that though, because if you start tying objects to global variables, it just creates kind of this little spaghetti link out there, and I don't want that. It might be something I have to think about. Because we want mouse leave to say it's no longer in this one, so if you're displaying this text, you no longer need to be doing that. So what I could do is on mouse enter, update the ID. And at the beginning of the step, if there's no ID, but I'm still left with the same problem. Interesting. Yeah, no matter what, mouse leave is just going to always kind of erase what I'm doing. Because you basically want to be able to check all of these archive items and make sure that none of them are selected. But I really don't want to have to do a loop where I go through every single archive item and check if it's selected or not. That may be the only solution though. It's the only one that's coming to mind right now. So mouse leave. Yeah, well that's not working, so let's get rid of that. If it's just inheriting from the parent, I don't need it. So one thing I do know is that mouse enter. I have this menu selected value that's set to true when the mouse is in and set to false when the mouse is out. So what I can do is loop through all of these archive items, and if no menu is selected, then I know nothing is being hovered over. Maybe the only way to do this. So I want to do that in step. So I need instance number. This is not. There's got to be a better way to do this. It's just not coming to me at the moment. I should probably check chat because one of you guys is probably telling me the better way to do this. Oops. Bar equals 0, I is less than instance number that, I plus plus. And what is it? Instance, which find, that's the one I want. Instance find. So this gets me, instance, archive item number 1, archive item number 2 out of this list. It's not an efficient way to do things. The only thing that kind of is a saving grace about it is that it would only be in a menu, which means there isn't a whole lot of processing stuff going on. So even if it isn't efficient, it's not gonna like suddenly like drop the frame rate or something to be doing this. Item equals that. If archive item dot menu selected equals true, only if it's true, then we want to update something. Or hover check. So set that to false by default. So assume that nothing's being hovered over by default. And if we do find something that is being hovered over, then we set hover check to true. And after we've gone through all of those items, if hover check is still false, then we can set menu text to just be blank. So this is kind of a brute force way of doing it, but it should work. Let's just test it. And then I'll catch up to the chat here. Extras, artifacts. Yeah, okay, there we go. And we don't have the frame problem anymore, so even if I get the mouse to another box within the frame, works fine. The other advantage of doing it this way is, of course, if I do squeeze these boxes together so that there is no real like mouse leave event in terms of like the overall thing, it's still going to work. So no matter what I do with the UI design now, it's going to work. So that's the advantage of that. So that's fine. Now the only thing is if I click, the description is still at the bottom, so I need to add the description in somewhere. I have to think about that. Let me catch up to the chat. Okay, so Lori gave me the thank you. Well, you're welcome, Lori. Welcome. We do, just so you know, the schedule's down there, but we do this every week. Just slowly over the course of a year making a game. This is our second season, our first season game, Project Spaghetti. There's information about it down there. And Risa41 says, if distance to point, inside, outside. Yeah, I can do the inside-outside thing. That's fine. I know if it's inside or outside because inside of the actual objects themselves, where is it? Oh, like here. On mouse enter, I set selected to true. On mouse leave, I set it to false. So for that particular item, I always know if the mouse is in or out. That's fine. But it's just overall knowing whether the mouse is in one of these or not was the problem. So right now, all I do is I loop through and check all of these menu selecteds. You could do, for example, like if distance to point, you could, for example, say width object and go through all of those. That's possible, and set a global variable to true. But you'd still be looping through everything, so it's kind of the same thing. Can't think of a solution where you don't have to loop through all of those items to check things. Was the problem. But let's create a quick object here, another text derivative. Where's my text archive name? Duplicate, and this one's going to hold the description if the player clicks on it. Item archive description, and I need a constant for that. Yeah, but I hope my description of the problem made sense. Yeah, the problem is just not having to loop through all of those. If there's a way to get around that, I couldn't think of one. Archive description, that's 290. And this one's not going to have a step. In some ways it'll be simpler because it's getting a command. In other ways it'll be more complex. So one thing I do need to do is be able to destroy this when the player clicks somewhere. So that should be easy enough. Add mouse left released. So if this text box does pop up and the player clicks, I want it to go away. So that's why this destroys in here. And left release just means when the player releases the mouse button. So when they click, it's on the release. Because if you just use left, it'll keep registering this over and over again. Although it is a destroy, so it'd probably be gone by the time it got to that second register. And anything else that I need to do for this? I guess I have to override the draw as well. Because this isn't just going to be text. There's no place to put text in this menu. So I'm going to have to override this stuff. And And by override, it's going to basically replace it, so it's not going to be able to use the inherited stuff. Text, copy, paste. So just ignore the parent stuff, because what it's going to have to do is, so that the player can concentrate on what they're reading, it needs to dim out the stuff behind it. Show, draw text, transform color. I don't need any of this stuff. And what I need to do is make the text box. I need to draw the text over the box. So I need to draw, just as a test, rectangle color. X. I just want to draw this in the middle of the screen. So to draw this in the middle of the screen, I'm taking the left edge and then half of the width of the screen, just so I don't get fractions. View, H view, view current, divided by 2. And I can always adjust this later. And so this is my base. So the middle's the base. Now I have to kind of bring the corner up a little bit. Let's see, I could do it this way. 4, divide by 4, div 4, times 3 div 4, times 3 div 4. So from a quarter of the screen to 3/4 of the screen, and the same from top to bottom. And the color, let's just go with C black, C black, C black, C black, that's fine. Outline false, I want an actual box there. And I do want to play with the alpha. I don't want just a black box, probably something that's like fairly dark, but not where everything behind it just kind of disappears. Bring the alpha back to 1 and draw the text in the middle where this object is. Description text. Yeah, I wonder how GameMaker handles draw text when there's line feed codes in there. We'll find out. Let's just get it working. Okay. So that's that. And do the same thing in here. Okay, that should be all right. And I need to actually add this into the menu somewhere. And then I'll catch up to the chat. Archive description, let's just put it in the middle. It's going to look weird. It will look weird. Because the text will probably run outside of the box or whatever, but not going to worry about that too much. Just want to make sure it gets updated after a click and it disappears after a click, one step at a time. And Lazy Vladik! Hey, Lazy Vladik, if you're still in here, what do you think about Trump? I'm not going to go into politics. It's nice to be an ocean removed from what's going on in my home country. So let's see. Artifacts. Okay, so now it always shows up, which is not a good thing. So actually, I don't want it to show up from the start. Okay, so I don't want it to be in here. I want it to appear on a click event. So left, I want it to appear in here. Instance create. Let's see, view current plus view, just put it in the middle. Div 2. And y view h view, y view height view, divide by 2. And the actual object I'm creating is that menu item. Menu item archive description. Okay. So now I have to click on something for the thing to appear. And so for one, I'm happy I have all my inventory stuff done. Yes, yeah, that is something you got done pretty early in your project, which is cool. Okay, one, alpha's not working. Two, the text isn't appearing on top. So we've got a few problems here, don't we? In terms of the text not appearing, I think that's just because I'm not actually setting the text. So I need to do that in here. So I do need to keep track of this instance for a little bit. Description box. And with description box, I can't do that. So description box, which means I have to check if it exists, otherwise the game could crash if it doesn't. So description box dot menu text is equal to the description. Okay, that should solve that problem at least. Let's just test it real quick. I can't do with, and I'll explain why again. It was the same problem with the names. I can't do with because it's using some information in here as well. Okay, yeah, as expected, the text is a mess, but that requires formatting and stuff like that. But the text does appear on top of the box which appears. The box should just fill up. There should probably just be an overall window tint, like I do with the pausing stuff, like when you play the game itself. I don't do that anymore. Okay, I did that in Project Spaghetti, but put like kind of a window tint in the background. So I should cover this whole thing with a semi-transparent box, and then have like an actual text box in the middle that pops up on top of that. But clicking gets rid of it. It's fine. So now it's just a matter of formatting the text and then figuring out why the alpha is not working. But yes, Risa mentioned you could use with. The reason I can't use with is the same reason I couldn't use it with the name, which is this. Because I'm clicking and passing information into this other object from the thing I clicked, I can't use with because then I don't have access to these anymore. So in that case, I have to use if instance exists and then this. If I didn't have to pass these in, then I'd be able to use with. That was the mistake I made earlier. I thought I could get away with, and then it couldn't find these two things. And draw text X to format it. Let's see. Yeah, you can do a lot of stuff with draw text X. So let's see what we can do. Draw text X transform color is the big beast. So this gives you position the string the separator. Is this what it's going to let me do a new line? If that's the case, then we don't have to worry about new line characters, which would be nice. Ah, no. Okay, it's the distance in pixels between lines of text. We'll still need that, though. The maximum width in pixels of the string before a line break. Okay, so that's what we need. Thank you, Risa. Yes. Okay, so this is pretty much what we need. So what we could do is XY, maybe text. That part's the same. Pixels between lines, there's no way to really know without seeing it, so let's just put it at 20. Width, the width of this thing right now is half the screen. Div2. X scale, that's going to be the same as above. X scale, global Y scale, depending on the resolution. Angle 0. Colors, menu color, menu color. Menu color, menu color. Alpha, menu alpha. So the rest of that should be the same. And this alpha, draw set alpha, draw rectangle color. Let me try lowering this even further. I don't think that's the problem though. Okay. -1 is the default. Okay, so I'll do that. So if you don't have a preference, use -1 to use the font default. Gotcha. Yeah, because otherwise this happens. Okay, let's do that. Thank you. Draw text. -1. Okay, so -1 for the default. And I should do that here as well. There we go. And the alpha's kind of working. Kind of. It does seem like... I know why the box isn't going away now. Okay. The problem is I'm using GameMaker's graphical mouse left released. The problem with that is I have to be over the collision of this to actually have that work. So if I do it here, it probably would get rid of that stuff, but I can't just do that. I can't use left released. I have to use a step item. So step, and all I have to do is check if the mouse was clicked. So if mouse button released, mouse button what? Mouse what? Mouse check button released. Okay. And the left mouse button. And that's instance destroy. There's also a few other things I have to do, which is... actually, this might actually handle what I need to do. What I was worried about is if you happen to be hovering over a different menu item and you click again, it's going to get rid of this one, but it's going to bring that one up. I still probably do have to handle that, but it should be a minor little thing. Because you still want... Because everything will be tinted out, it wouldn't make sense to be able to interact with this stuff in the background. So it's worth like locking those down if this thing is up here. It shouldn't be too hard to do though. Shoot. One more thing. One more problem. Left released. Yeah, it's creating it and destroying it in the same step. Okay. Fine. Add events. Alarm event 0. Bar. free is true, then we'll do this stuff. Okay, there we go. I just need that bit of a delay because the problem is it creates the instance, but then it's the same frame where the mouse button is being released to create the instance, so it's just destroying it the same frame, I think. Yeah. Okay, so now as long as we dim the background and get this text box bigger, and think about, obviously changing the font style, yeah, because that's huge, it'll work. And the alpha stuff is working fine now too. And if I click, it should go away. There we go. Yeah, 1, 2, 3 gas, all the text. Yeah, let's just fix that font real quick. Let's create a new font. And artifact description. In fact, this font size might be the right font size. Font artifact title. It's the one I'm using in-game, but it might work. Artifact description, because it is smaller. And I guess that's okay. The only other thing I could do before kind of ending up the show is just make sure that the player can't click on something that's in the background. Yeah, that's way too small, and it's invisible, so I have to change the color and stuff. But the only thing I want to do right now before kind of ending up the show, I can fix a lot of this stuff over the next week, but the thing I want to do is make sure that the player can't click here and have something else pop up. All I want to do is have a click get rid of this, so that the player has to kind of click once to get rid of that and then pick another one. Because otherwise, after the screen is dimmed, it's going to be kind of weird if that's not the case. So what I need to do is just do a quick thing here. In fact, let's just put it inside of the script itself. I don't need those debug messages anymore. So if that text box doesn't exist, then you can click. Your item archive description. Okay. Probably should actually have the menu lockdown stuff working, because if the player does click on like leaving the menu as well, probably want to lock that out too. Because we'll have the same problem. If they click on back, they can leave the menu. Yeah, there we go. So you do have to click twice. You have to click once to get rid of it, and then click once again to pick whatever you're picking. Right now it doesn't look like that's very useful because this stuff is highly visible, but eventually this will get dimmed out, so in that case it's going to be weird if you're clicking on something that's just barely visible and something happens. And Risa said, today I used begin step for the first time. It has one line of code. What did you use begin step for? That's interesting, because yeah, like begin step, I've had to use it a couple of times to make sure that things are kind of like set to true or false before like doing all the testing in step and collisions and stuff like that. So I have used it before, but interesting. Yeah, what did you use it for? And graphical design choices for the win. Yeah. Right now it looks very ugly. I apologize for that, but yeah. I want to come up with the design before I start getting too fancy with it. And Blue Tengu, you can draw the box like I do in my game when I pause top to bottom. Yeah, I will do that. That's what I do with like Project Spaghetti, for example. In fact, let me just show that real quick. So I'm gonna end Project Skyring. I think we got everything we needed to do done today, and I do have to get to school. But let's see, Project Spaghetti. I'll bring it up here. Like for example, if you pause in here, it kind of dims the screen. Not much, it just dims the screen and brings up like a box over it and stuff. But I will be doing that as well to kind of hide the background stuff so that you're focused on the text. What we did was episode 37, Grail fail. What we did was we added the artifacts menu. So those artifacts that you can collect in the game, there's now a quick menu. There's a grid of graphic objects. They are zoned by the conditions for finding them. In other words, they're kind of visually separated. Obviously right now that's pretty messy, but they're visually separated, and you can select an item for playback and subtitles. I do need to actually add in something. Artifacts menu. This won't take long. For audio, because these are actually two separate things. That's more what we did. And probably want to add monoliths to that as well, so that you can get all the story stuff that you've collected in one place. But let's do that. So Grail fail, episode 37. That's what we got done. Let's think about episode 38 for next week. By the way, if you're curious, this task list is publicly viewable. If you search Trello and Project Skyring, this should be the only link that pops up, really. Episode 38. So, next week. Yeah, I think I do want to do this one next. Fuzzy state switching logic. I want to do this one next week because it's going to affect the enemy AI, and I think it's better to do that sooner than later. And what this means is you have the enemies. They have various like radiuses and things like that. So for example, they have like a radius around here. I should use a different color. They have like a radius around them. I'm sorry, I didn't draw it in the middle, so I can't do a great job at this. And if the player enters that radius, they start to chase. If the player leaves a bigger radius, then they stop chasing. They kind of stop and just do their own thing. I would rather do fuzzy switching logic because it's going to make the enemies feel more natural. Because right now what you can do is it feels like a trigger. If you're an X distance away, the enemy just switches. It's like, I'm doing my own thing, you come into the trigger, chase. You leave another trigger, I'm doing my own thing. What's better to do is you have like kind of like a bar graph going here, for example. You have something like this, and you have a cutoff here. So that if the player is inside of this radius, this number starts to build up. If the player leaves before it hits that red line, nothing changes. But if the player comes back in and crosses this point, then the enemy starts to chase. And you have a different cutoff here. You have a different cutoff here. Probably should just make the whole screen. I hope it's visible for you guys. Then if the player kind of leaves this blue radius, the enemy still chases them for a little bit, but if the player can stay out of range long enough, the enemy will give up. That way it's not just on, off. It's more, there's something fishy. All right, I'll chase. He's getting kind of far away. All right, I'll give up. It's a little more smooth that way. Like you could imagine like a Splinter Cell kind of stealth game. If the enemy is just, the second they registered like, okay, the player's in my line of sight, chase, then that game would become impossible. You need kind of like the, Fisher kind of moment where it's like oh shoot, I have to hide or something. It gives you a couple of seconds to kind of fix things. In this game, it's obviously not stealth, so it doesn't have to be like a very long period, but it just has to have like a little bit of a build-up and a little bit of a letdown, so it doesn't feel like an on-off thing. It doesn't quite feel on-off because I do have two different radiuses here. Uh, so you get into the smaller radius, it goes on. You don't just leave that small radius and have it turn off. You have to leave a larger radius for it to turn off. So there is a range, but I would just rather have it build up over time and stuff. But that is that. I will wrap up the show. Let me just check the chat real quick. And 123 Gas mentioned I might have to use Trello to plan out my final project for college. Seems pretty handy. It is handy. It is easy to use, and the nice thing about it is you can access it anywhere you want, and it's free for the basic functionality. Everything I'm doing is in the free version. And Melissa McKay mentioned I always put like moods in the enemies, and depending on what you did to them, it affects how they want to attack or how long they come after you. Yeah, that's a point too. Like having enemies, it's like a state machine. Moods are kind of a state machine. Like the enemy's angry, the enemy's happy, the enemy is tired. You know, you can do these kind of things and switch back and forth between them. And the state machine, we have the state machine in our game too. Like the enemy's angry and attacking you, the enemy's swarming you if you're really close, or the enemy's just kind of tootling along doing its own thing, or it's trying to follow your tail. It's, you know, it's got these different states that it's switching back and forth between. But the state trigger itself is just, you know, an on-off switch. Even if the radiuses are different sizes, it's still an on-off switch. So yeah, actually using kind of the, if you look up, it's probably if you do look up like fuzzy logic in general, if you look it up, you can see stuff about it, but it's more about, you know, kind of having like this gray zone so that things feel more natural, because people, animals, things like that, there's kind of a gray zone. Different personalities, like for example, if you did want different personalities in your characters, you could have change that gray zone per enemy. Like you could have some enemies that are kind of twitchy and like they switch pretty quickly from like relaxed to chase. You could have other enemies that are just kind of slower, like giant, you know, lumbering enemies or something. You could have that gray zone be pretty big, so it's like they notice you and they're kind of turning their head and just like thinking about whether they're going to follow you. And then if you stay there too long, then they start to kind of come after you. But yeah, 123 Gas, having enemies chase you no matter what is a nice mechanic too. Gives a reason to deal with threats, but you need a way to make them despawn if you start gathering too many too far away. Yeah, and there's already despawn in this. Right now, if the enemies leave, let's see. Imagine your monitor. Imagine an extra monitor beyond that. If the enemy goes past that, then they finally just get destroyed. So I do kind of do that. So thank you for watching our game development show. You can catch past episodes in this one over at youtube.com/BlueTangoStudio, all one word. Everything's archived over there. I do cut out a lot of like the random chats and stuff like that just to kind of keep it tighter for YouTube. If you are watching this later on YouTube, come drop by the live show we do every week on Twitch TV Blue Tengu. I live in Japan and I do this now Sundays, 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. Which is why my mind isn't quite working. Yes, so Sundays, 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. Japan. If you live in Japan, you're probably not watching the show. But if you live overseas, if you're in the Americas, it's Saturdays, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, 3 to 5 Central, 4 to 6 Eastern. If you're in the UK, I believe, 123 Gas can correct me if I'm wrong, but it should be 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Saturday night in the UK. If you're in like Australia, New Zealand, stuff like that, the times are down there, but it's basically going to be early Sunday morning. Not as early as Japan, at least if you're in New Zealand, but pretty early. But we do always announce what we're doing through Twitter. So follow BTengu, BTENGU, to keep track of when the live show starts or episodes go up. Or follow us on Twitch or YouTube to get announcements. And of course, you can see what we're up to anytime over at our site, bluetengu.com. Again, for those of you who pitched in a little extra for our Season 1 game, Project Spaghetti, over at HIO, you do have the Sapphire Key. I should be able to put a build up. There's, you know, unless you want to play around with the archive menu, there's probably not a lot to do this week versus last week, but I'll put a build up anyway. And of course, we would appreciate any support you can give us getting Project Spaghetti greenlit on Steam. If you search for Project Spaghetti on Greenlight, you'll find it. It is very retro, so it's one of those things that's tough to get greenlit, but it is a fun game, I think. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next week, next time.